idea that he emphasized was that we need to have a cultural sensitive curriculum for our education. So that idea was put forward by him. So then when I saw that information, I thought that the very topic that I should choose for the panel discussion, I think the most appropriate is history of tribal education in India. So if we look into the history of tribal education in India, we can see tribal education at three distinct periods. The first is tribal education in ancient period, tribal education in medieval period, and tribal education in modern period. And again, then if we see the history of tribal education in modern period, it can be classified into two basic periods, that is pre-independence period and post-independence period. And then pre-independence period can again classified into two sub period, that is East India Company period and then British period till that is 1947. And after that 1947, once we got the independence, till that post-independence period. So if we go through the ancient, tribal education during ancient period, we can see that the two parallel system of education existed during that time, that is Vedic education system and Buddhist education system. But both the system, the nature of the society at that period was too religious oriented, and because of that, the four varna, which were the entire people in the society has been divided into four varna, and those four varna has been kept in the hierarchical order. And even for the education, if we see, the entire education system was religious oriented, and it was dominated by the varna which was in the highest in the hierarchy in the four varna, out of the four varna, that is Brahmin. So, and even education was, when I say education, you should not get confused. See, when a child comes into this world, a child is completely a biological animal. But since the child started interacting with his environment, then only child transform into social animal. So my point here is that the process which brings change into the behavior of the child, or which transform a child from biological animal to social animal, is called education. And when we say education, this process can be seen under three classification. One is formal education, second is informal education, the third is non-formal. So when we say formal education, it refers to that type of education in which specified knowledge are being induced by a specially trained person in a specified place within a specified time to a specified category of students. So that is like formal education, like education that we receive in the formal institution, school, colleges. And non-formal education, another classification of education is that it refers to that type of education which is very much like formal, but only in terms of flexibility, like in terms of admission criteria, in terms of age for admission. Those things are very flexible when we say non-formal. So through that process also we can change, we can transform human being. And then another classification of education is informal education. And when we say informal education, it refers to the individualized education. So it's not only through the formal instruction like classroom teaching and learning. We can even learn, bring change in our behavior through our informal discussion with our friend, while journeying in other places, discussion with your peer group, your teacher, and even while working in the laboratory, and numerous other informal activities that we do beside teaching and learning. So my point here is that I'm going to emphasize about the history of tribal education with reference to formal education. So if we see the history of tribal education in ancient period, during ancient period, there was no chance for tribal education. That means mass education was completely absent, because education was completely dominated by the three upper caste in the caste hierarchy, that is Varna, that is Brahmin, Kshatriya, and Vaishya. Even Sudras were not allowed to receive education. And that the very, the concern, dissatisfaction, because of that nature of education, the dissatisfaction, it grew among the people, and that dissatisfaction led emergence of Buddhist education system during 600 BC, 600 CE, since 600 CE, but until 1200 Buddhist education system prevailed. And same thing happened. Obviously, we can say that Buddhist education system grew out against the Vedic education system, but still then later if we see same thing also prevailed in the Buddhist, and especially for Buddhist education, the learning center, they used to give education in the monastery. So monasteries were the main, institution for providing education. And obviously, unlike Vedic system, education was free. To receive education, every child can comes to monastery. But the condition they kept for joining the monastery was that after joining the monastic education, a child should adopt Buddhist religion. So that was one ground which restricted again other children from different cultural background to join the Buddhist education. So that condition especially hindered again tribal children to join. And mostly another thing is also that even now also modern period also, if you see the statistic, 2011 census report, approximately 89% of tribal people, they live in rural area, which is very much, in terms of transportation and other facilities, very much, depriving in compared to the, urban area. So during that period, mostly monastic education was organized in the urban area, and tribal people mostly, because they live in the rural area, there was also another condition that they could not, even if they want, they could not access education. So that also caused, lack of tribal education during ancient period. So coming to the medieval period, since 1200th century, the literature told us that, it's the new system of education that became very prominent in India, that is Islam education system. And it is said that during Islam mostly again then during medieval period also the nature of education was too religious, and mostly they had the indigenous education system, that is maktab and madrasa. Primary education was given in the maktab and higher education was used to give in the madrasa. So mostly maktab was attached to mosques, and madrasa after 10th century AD only, they started, establishing madrasa separately. Otherwise, before 10th century, madrasa was also attached to the mosque. So that was one reason why, because they gave emphasized too much on religious education. So even the other students who were willing to come for the education, they, prohibit themselves from getting education. So that is one reason why, again, we can say that we can witness lack of mass education during medieval period. Mass education in the sense, education was not provided to all the children, okay? It was not a privilege for all the children. Then coming to the modern period, I think those who are from history, I don't know whether I have the right knowledge or not, because history, person who is specialized in history is also sitting here. So, so far my little knowledge is concerned, since 1613th century, the British, they came in India, but then, that's how, through the permission from the Mughal Emperor, the Jahangir, they started establishing their bridge center. And it was not the British, rather British obviously, but the East India Company who were the marching group. Okay, so because they were the marching group, they never had concern for education of Indian people. So till India got the independence, the general mass themselves was struggling for getting formal education. So not to talk about the tribal people. But still then if we see, if we recount those things, we can say that one of the important landmark effort which has been, which has happened, maybe you can say that colonial government for the education of tribal people is put this place 1854. Okay, so through the Charter Act of 1813, the British, when East India Company came in India, they had only the motive to spread their trade center and exploit the economy of the Indian economy, and they never had any intention to provide education to the Indian people. But the thing was that when they came in India, they came with their family, and when they came with their family, they also had the children. So because that time transportation was not very easy, to go back to the Britain it was very difficult. It may take very long time. So what was their idea was that they brought some missionary also along with them to educate their own children. So missionary, when they entered in India along with the East India Company, they had the idea to evangelize Indian people. So to evangelize Indian people, it was very important that people first should be taught reading and writing in English. Then only they could read the Bible. So that motive, pressurized, or you can say, motivated missionary to give English education to Indian people. But at that time, East India Company was never, they were very reluctant to give education to Indian people. But later on, because of the effort of Christian missionary, British Crown, they agreed through Charter Act of 1813, they gave the power to the missionary to spread education, formal education, English education to Indian masses. So, but once the Charter Act, which came, 3 clauses were added in that. The first clause, the new clause was that since 1813 Charter Act, the East India Company has to spend 1 lakh per annum for education of Indian people. Second important clause was that missionaries should be given power to educate Indian people. And then third was not very important, but still then, there was no any remark regarding how that 1 lakh rupees should be spent. So controversy arose on that point, that if they will give education to Indian people, what sort of education should be given. So 2 groups formed at that time, and the idea, one group said, Orientalist group said that the Indian education should be provided to the Indian people. The nature should be Oriental. That means the knowledge of Sanskrit, the knowledge of Hindi, all those things should be given. But again, the Occidentalist group, they supported the Western education. They said the science education and all those education should be given. And that controversy is known as Oriental and Occidental controversy, which 1823, I think that was the date. Okay, but it lasted for, and that controversy, prolonged so long that in 1834, Lord Macaulay has to be intervened. Then that controversy was resolved after the Lord Macaulay has given his Macaulay Minute in 1835. So Lord Macaulay favored Western education for the Indian mass, but who dismissed downward filtration theory? I think those who are from the history, they might know that higher education was meant for only elite people. So they don't want to give mass education, mass higher education. So they say that people who belongs to elite society, they only should be allowed to come for the higher education. But who displays when it comes, it's one of the greatest effort that colonial government has done for the Indian people in common. Okay, so Wood Dispatch 1854 has, through that downward filtration theory has been removed, and they say that higher education should be given to all the children who wish to come from the higher education. It should not be, restriction should not be put based on the socio-economic background. That one should not. It's not as, it's not that children who belongs from the different, low strata of society cannot come. Rather, this downward filtration theory should be removed from. So that is special effort. That is one of the effort which we can see towards tribal education, during post-independence period. Coming to the independent period, and most, I think, immediately after independence, if we see what is the, most, renowned, or you can say major effort which has been initiated by government for tribal education is in 1948, when University Education Commission came up, immediately after independence. Okay, so University Education, this commission was meant for, providing recommendation to improve higher education in India. But this particularly, if you see one recommendation which has a very great bearing for tribal education, was that University Education Commission, it recommended establishment of university in the rural area. But before that, if you see why, mostly people who are from Kolkata, they are very good in English, or Madras or those, because higher education, it is started from the Kolkata. The first higher education, it is started in 1813, okay? And that is one of the reasons why they are very good in education. So higher education was not, it was not available in all the places. But through this Radhakrishnan Commission, which is also known as University Education Commission, which came in 1948 to 49, it recommended that university should be established in all the rural area. And I told you that during the beginning of my lecture, that mostly tribal people, majority of tribal people, they live in rural area, has enabled tribal people to get to enjoy the benefit of higher education even in the rural area also. After that, again, another initiative has been taken by the government, that is Mudaliar Commission, which came in the year 1952. But Mudaliar Commission, because it was meant for improving the secondary education, so it didn't have much for tribal education, but only one recommendation which I found very much related to tribal education was that Mudaliar Commission has recommended two language formula for primary level and 3 language formula for the secondary level. Then after that, Kothari Commission came, that is in the year 1964 to 66. Then Kothari Commission again emphasized on 3 language formula. 3 language formula is a language policy which has been initiated by Indian government, and time and again it was emphasized to different commission and committee also. Then according to 3 language formula, the first language, that is mother tongue or regional language, it should be given in the primary level. Then second language should be Hindi in non-Hindi speaking area, and in Hindi speaking area it should be either Sanskrit or other modern Indian language, out of all the 22 languages which has been provided under Schedule 8 of Indian Constitution. Okay, so that, and the third language should be the English education or other European language. So that language policy has been suggested by Kothari Commission, and because of this, this recommendation letter on was endorsed by National Policy on Education 1968. And in one of the landmark initiatives that we can see towards the tribal education is National Policy on Education, or you can say New Education Policy on Education 1986. So in fact, that scholarship that today you are getting, okay, especially big ST community, student belongs to ST community. So all those things has been suggested by New Education Policy 1986, and especially the ashram school, or establishment of ashram school, mostly in rural areas, and inclusion of tribal culture and tribal knowledge in the curriculum. So जल्दी बताएगा, हम इतना वो नहीं है ना, थोड़ा सा नहीं बताएंगे फिर I think that it will just I don't want to keep it up. Okay, so 1986, it's a very landmark, you can say, Magna Carta of Indian education. If we see the even not only tribal education but entire education, okay, landscape, educational landscape you see. So those important, even for universalization of education was also emphasized there. Obviously, Gokhale Bill 1911 it emphasized on universalization, but that time it was not very successful. Later on, gradually, when different commission came, and again it was emphasized. And in NPE 1986, there is this policy, educational policy, it emphasized on the universalization, and because of its recommendation, many like Operation Blackboard, and if you see the JNB schools, okay, JNB schools and the model schools, KB schools, like all these women education, non-formal education, ODL, and open school, all those are the result of the recommendation made by NPE 1986. So those are the things which really benefited tribal children, and which really it pushed forward tribal education scenario in our country. And after that, if we see important initiative, another important initiative which has been carried out by Indian government is after mid-day meal scheme in 1995, which was launched in 1995. So mostly mid-day meal scheme was meant for the socially and economically backward, educationally backward blocks, okay, and all the tribal area, most of the tribal area falls under that category. And then mid-day meal, which it was meant for improving the nutritional status of children, especially school education children. And because of the poverty, okay, many tribal children, the dropout rate is still, dropout rate if you see at primary level, the highest you can see the dropout level among the ST, even not the SC or other, but ST. So considering that situation, government they came up with the scheme, mid-day meal scheme, and now in NEP 2020 it has extended the provision of mid-day meal to up to secondary level. Earlier it was meant for only elementary primary student, but now it has extended for secondary level student also. Then in 2004, another scheme, very important scheme, has been initiated by Indian government, especially for the tribal, girls, and that is KGBB, Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalaya. And this scheme particularly, it emphasized on establishment of residential school in the rural area, which is considered educationally backward, and especially for the girls. Okay, so initially when KGBB was launched in the year 2004, this scheme was meant only for the secondary level, but now NEP 2020, it has also recommended to extend this provision, KGBB, Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalaya provision, till higher secondary level, and that is another important landmark. Then after that, I think one of the very important initiative which we can see from the Indian government side for the benefit of tribal students is Right to Education Act 2009. Okay, and through this act, which came in the year 2010, 1 April. Okay, though the idea was very much rooted since the year 2001. So through that act, Right to Education Act 2009, education has been made fundamental right. But here again, most of the people think that when we say education becomes the fundamental right, not every education, every stages of education. When we say formal education, it has been divided into 4 stages, that is foundational, preparatory, middle, secondary, and then higher education. That is the 5th level. Okay, so it is mostly Right to Education Act. It has, it made education fundamental right, not all the education level, but elementary education. Right, so that was important, and another is NEP 2020. Obviously, you can see. So one of the major, recommendation that we can see NEP 2020, which has been made towards for the tribal education development, is multicultural and multilingual sensitive curriculum. And it is because of this reason many IKS, indigenous knowledge system, seminar, workshop on this very particular topic has been seen continuously being organized throughout the country by the colleges and universities, because this is one of the recommendations from the NEP 2020 that IKS should be included in the curriculum, not only in school education, but it should be starting from school education to higher education. So these are some of the initiatives which has really played a very great role for improving, for tribal empowerment, because that education is one of the main instruments for social transformation, isn't it? So we see, and there are other minor things like establishment of NCRT in the year 1961, and then SCRT in 1970. So those NCRT, why I'm telling you NCRT? Because NCRT, it's an apex body at national level which prepared textbook for school education. Okay, so when we say cultural sensitive curriculum, those things can be, the main agency who will work for this is NCRT at national level and SCRT at state level. So those 2 apex body has been given the responsibility to make the curriculum cultural sensitive. And even again NEP 2020 has also emphasized on implementation of 3 language formula, and then vocational education is starting from school to higher education based on the local craft, that means indigenous knowledge system. So if we consider that idea, the tribal craft, the tribal things, the craft and other things can be included in the vocational courses. So in this way, I think this would like to give here my